All right, here we go. Take number 2. All right, I guess my video last night was a little long, so I'm going to have to break it up into short segments. All right, so what's really important and why we're having this conversation is just to dispel some myths. There were a lot of really good information on the text chain yesterday, but there was also a lot of information that wasn't necessarily good, or at least not backed by any evidence. And it's really important, I think, to have a good understanding of this actual science and have a good understanding of what's going on, so that we can make informed decisions and not spread misinformation, because I think that is at the heart of what we call panic. But we shouldn't be panicking, but at the same time, there's definitely a good reason for concern. All right, so first thing that I think is important is to understand what actually a viral infection is. So first thing we're looking at here is, I'm sure most of you are aware how viruses get into our blood, but this is in our bloodstream, right? And so you have our blood vessel over here, and in the blood vessel you got lots of red blood cells, but you also have these other things, these much larger cells. These are white blood cells, and in addition to that, every now and then we get viruses. Now, most of the time we're exposed to viruses, and our white blood cells just take care of them. So if we're looking at this next page, one of the things that's really important, what we're looking at here, is this over here is a human cell. Okay, so when we're looking at the human cell, there's some things that are really important to note about this. Now, we're not going to look at all the parts, but some things that you need to know is, this is the membrane. This is what makes it a cell. This is what surrounds the cell, and inside we have chromosomes, or in other words, DNA. This controls the cell. It's really important. But one of the other features that you see here that's quite important is on the outside here of the cell, you have these surface proteins. And you'll notice that these surface proteins, they're specialized proteins. They have a specific shape, which allows your body to determine that these are your cells. If you look at this bacterial cell over here, this is a drawing of a bacterial cell. Bacteria is much, much smaller. It's still got a membrane, some other features, but one of the things that's different about it is that it has different surface proteins. And this is incredibly important, because this is what allows your white blood cells then to identify this as not self. Okay, so this is self and this is not self. So when your white blood cells are circulating in your blood and looking for foreign invaders, they are able to look at these surface proteins and say, hey, these are not my surface proteins. Butters! We need to attack and destroy. So, Butters, come here. Hey. Awesome. It's a little girl, Butters. It's a little girl. So, what's next over here is what the white blood cells do and how they work. So this essentially works the same for bacteria and viruses as well. So here's your white blood cell. I couldn't draw the whole thing because white blood cells are incredibly large compared to other foreign invaders, such as the flu, okay, or other viruses. But what's important here is on this white blood cell. This white blood cell has these special surface proteins, or they're related to antibodies, and these guys here are responsible for detecting foreign invaders. So once they detect the foreign invaders, they are able to surround, they're able to attach to the viruses and surround, and then take them up and attack and basically consume them and get rid of them and then digest them, and then that's how we fight sickness. So if you're looking at this virus over here, take a look at the shape, okay, and we'll look at viruses a little bit more specifically here. So when we're looking at the virus, this is a typical coronavirus over here, and it was mentioned in the text chain a couple of times that, oh, the coronavirus is old, why do we have to worry about it? Well, it is kind of old, in terms of, it has been around. We've seen different strains of this before. Okay, the examples that you may remember a little bit when we were younger. 2003, there was the SARS outbreak, and then a little while after that, there was the MERS outbreak. Now those outbreaks didn't progress nearly as far as this outbreak. Okay, but those were other examples of coronaviruses. Now, when we say coronavirus, what we're referring to is the structure of the shape of the virus. And viruses are, if we're looking at the structure, there's a couple of things of note. Number one, you can look at this outside structure over here, and this is basically just made out of a protein. It's called a protein coat. It's got some fancy names to it, capsid, but for right now, it's just made up of protein. And look at the shape here. In this case, it's shaped almost like a crown, hence the name coronavirus. That's where the term comes from. This is a family of viruses. The other thing that's incredibly important about viruses is the DNA, or the genetic material. Some viruses can have DNA, some can have RNA, maybe more on that to come in a little bit, but for right now, you can just think of this as genetic material. This is the stuff, this is the DNA that controls all of these features and how this virus works. So if we're looking at the coronavirus versus the new novel coronavirus, the COVID-19 virus, what's different about these? And the real difference between these is in the structure of this outside protein coat. Okay, and it's not much different. It just, and I this is my drawing for simplicity, obviously, all right, to make it a little easier to understand. But we changed the shape, we changed the color of the picture, obviously, all right, just to make it a little bit more clear. But the shape is slightly different. So how and why does that arise? Okay, well, if we're looking at a virus, first of all, it's important, before we get into that, it's important to understand how viruses cause infection and how do they actually do damage. So we have to look at the stages of viral infection. So stage number one over here, this is a normal human cell. This can be a human cell, this can be a plant cell, a bacterial cell. Each virus is specific for a certain type of cell. So we're talking about the novel coronavirus. So therefore, we're talking about a human cell in this case, but it's the same essentially for all viruses and how they work. So you notice that this virus over here is stuck to this cell, right? The next thing that needs to happen is this virus is able to inject its DNA into the cell. And that's really quite important. If we go back one picture over here, viruses are not considered to be living things. They're not considered to be living things because they don't have the characteristics of all other living things. So if we look at the characteristics of living things, all living things have cells. All living things are able to use energy. They have metabolism. All living things are able to respond to their ecosystem, respond to their environment. They have homeostasis, which is they're able to maintain certain characteristics in their bodies, like body temperature. Viruses don't have those characteristics. At the same time, though, they're not dead, or they're not non-living as well. And the reason for that is because they do have some of the characteristics of life. So they're really at this weird living, non-living kind of in between life and non-life. And the reason that they have some characteristics of life is because of their DNA. And the way that DNA is built, all living things have the same exact genetic code, or the same genetic machinery, rather. It all works in the same way. So DNA from this thing will work in DNA of another. All right, we're gonna pause there, okay, and then we'll pick it up with another video.